And I call the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, what could have been more symbolic than a Prime Minister appearing in this parliament projected on a screen? A virtual PM, from hollow man to hologram. That's what we have. That's what we have. More promo than ScoMo. There he is, in quarantine for 2 weeks, and he could have taken anyone with him. Could have taken anyone, the head of Prime Minister and Cabinet, economic advisor, national security advisor. Who did he take? His photographer. His photographer. Because that was the priority for this Prime Minister. A Prime Minister who believes you can fake it until you make it. This Prime Minister. Not a Prime Minister, more a prime marketer. And we've seen it with the advertising campaign done, paid for by taxpayers, with over $1 million to Crosby Textor, paid for, feeding into their questions and answer in question time. What we see from this Prime Minister and this government is all about the marketing and never about the substance. All about the announcement and never about the delivery. Look at infrastructure. $6.8 billion gap between what they've said they would spend on budget night and what they've actually spent. You can't actually drive on a promise. You need to drive on a road. You need to ride on a train. You need to fix a project like Inland Rail that doesn't even go to a port. This is a government where when you look at the announcement, you wait for the delivery and it just doesn't happen. Remember the National Integrity Commission? Announced way back in 2018, but nothing, just crickets. The Emergency Response Fund, $4 billion, $200 million each year, so they've had $400 million available to them this year and not a dollar spent. Now, this morning with the member for Eden Monaro and the Shadow Minister, Senator Watt, we were out there in Braidwood talking to Rural Fire Service cadets and talking to those people who protected those communities. I tell you what, those students in that cadets program could do with a bit more input, a bit more funding, $200 million, but for those opposite, not a dollar spent. The Arts Sector Rescue Package, remember that, $250 million announced with Guy Sebastian, 20% allocated up to this point. Even Guy Sebastian has taken to social media to say what is actually going on. But that's not the worst. The Boosting Female Founders Initiative, perhaps. 2 years ago it was announced, not a dollar invested, not a dollar spent, and this year in the budget they announced round 2. They haven't spent a dollar in round 1, but they've announced round 2. Then there's the $1.5 billion modern manufacturing strategy, 3% available this year. Anyone would think that there hasn't been a recession going on. 3% this year. Then there's the NAIF, $5 billion announced 5 years ago. How much has been spent? $169 million. No wonder we call it the No Actual Infrastructure Fund. Then there's the Water Infrastructure Loans Facility. It's a doozy. It was announced way back in May 2016. They have had no less than 50 media announcements and press releases, not a dollar spent, and now it's been abolished. All it produced was 50 media releases. Then there's a range of other projects, like they've got a threatened species fund. Now, that's not about smaller Liberals in the Liberal Party. It's actually about koalas and other threatened species. But what we know is there's no habitat they're not prepared to rip down, this Minister of Koalas and other endangered species. So one of the themes of this government is it's all announcement, no delivery. But there's another big theme as well, the wasted recovery, waste and mismanagement. Robodebt's the worst. An illegal scheme, a cruel scheme that led to self-harm and led to people literally taking their own lives. And what we get from those opposite is just nonsense, absolute nonsense. When we had the question, asked at the end of question time, what we had from those opposite was just contempt for the processes here. When it was pointed out they were threatening people that they'd go to prison. That's what they were threatening. At the same time, we'll track you down, they said, for a scheme that they knew at the time was illegal. That was what Minister Tudge had to say. And a settlement that cost $1.2 billion, but they say, oh, we haven't admitted there's anything wrong here. We just handed over $1.2 billion. Why not? It's only taxpayers' money. Just extraordinary. Then we had the NBN. We told them. The world told them. Anyone who knew anything about communications told them, funnily enough, fibre is this century's technology, not copper. But I know, they had their mix. $4.5 billion they're having to pay to fix up the NBN. Then there's the Leppington Triangle. $30 million they paid for it. It was worth $3 million to a Liberal Party donor. Surprise, surprise. Then there's the sports rort scandal. Remember that? $100 million, the colour charts in the Prime Minister's office, colour-coded by electorate, by marginality. Not worrying about all those voluntary sports groups that were so naive they believed in the system, so they spent hours, hundreds of hours, putting together applications, but they never had a chance. What they should have done was just looked at the electoral pendulum. So the fact is that this government, waste and mismanagement, all announcement, no delivery. But there's something else as well that defines them. The people who have been left behind and the people who've been held back. The people left behind in aged care during this crisis. 685 deaths. They are responsible for aged care. They fund it, they regulate it, they manage it. And yet, no COVID plan, no COVID plan. And this week, we learn as well they didn't have a COVID plan for people with disabilities either, from the Disability Royal Commission. We know when it comes to childcare, not just older people, little people as well miss out under this government. Childcare, first people thrown off support for wage subsidies. We know as well that those people, casuals, arts workers, university workers, Donata workers, people who are visa holders, all missing out on support. Labor, though, has a plan. We have a plan with an emphasis on follow-up and delivery, a plan to create jobs as our first priority. We have a plan for childcare, economic reform, not welfare, that will increase participation of women in the workforce. A plan for a future built in Australia, whether it's building our trains here, whether it be a power transmission network for the 21st century that will help to make us a renewable energy superpower. We want an economy that's resilient. We want to continue to export resources, but we want to value add here where we can and make sure that we create high-value jobs here. That's our priority, an economy that's resilient, one that recognises the weaknesses that have been exposed during this period. We want a future where no one is left behind and no one is held back, a future where aspiration is embraced. We want to create wealth as well as be concerned about its distribution. And what that needs is a government that's actually focused on the national interest, not a government that's obsessed with marketing, that's obsessed with advertising, that just is obsessed with having the announcement and not worrying about the follow-up or the delivery. But with this Prime Minister, we've seen the priorities exposed this week yet again. A government that has come in here during question time, gets every question with all the slogans that have been worked out by Crosby Textor, the answers all worked out as well. Nothing about the real concerns of Australians. Today we asked about those people, such as workers in the gig sector, such as Qantas workers, and others who've lost their job and been left behind. But they're too busy self-congratulating themselves, too busy with their hubris and their arrogance. Australians deserve better. We deserve a government that's actually concerned about the interests of the Australian people rather than concerned about themselves like this government is.